Again, thank you all very much for joining us. This is your voice in the community, Thought That Get Results. With regard to your participation in the show, we encourage you to call in the numbers listed 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You have a question or comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that when you're well organized and when you're getting on the show, you take as little time as possible so we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem as not within our broadcast standards. But we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. You can also follow this broadcast on our Facebook page at Vaughan Radio and our YouTube channel, Vaughan Radio. Click subscribe and you get the video feed for this program. Thank you all again this evening. The Deputy Premier of Nevis and the area representative for St. James in the Nevis Island Assembly and the area representative for St. James and St. Thomas in the Federal Assembly of St. Kitts and Nevis. He is celebrating 10 years as a parliamentarian. He argues he has been serving for much longer than 10 in another capacity. We are very pleased to have him, the Deputy Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Alexis Jeffers. Good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and thank you for having me this evening. And I want to say good evening as well to the entire listening and viewing public, because Vaughan Radio is being streamed live as well. So I want to say greetings to everyone. I know you have listeners and viewers throughout the entire globe. So all who are listening and viewing at this time, I welcome you. Thank you.
We got an hour and we would like to do it this way. Why don't we first of all, congratulations on your 10 years of service in that capacity.
Thank you.
We know that you had a week of celebrations for particular that occasion. This is on the backside of it, almost of the end. At the end of it, you perhaps can tell us how that went. But first off, why don't you, in brief, because we don't have a lot of time, and it's covering a lot of time, give us an account of your stewardship.
Sure, Webbo. If I may, let me just start quickly with the activities that we had throughout the month of October. And the reason why we celebrated during the month of October is because actually the elections of 2011 was held in July of that year. Obviously, this year we had some issues with the difficulties and challenges with the COVID-19 situation, pandemic that is, that we are facing at this time. Of course, there was some lockdown in July and we were unable to have any activities whatsoever. So we somewhat compressed everything into October, because in July we were planning on having a lot of community-related activities like cricket and other sporting activities, and we didn't have those. But in October we had at least 4 activities. We had a community day on the 12th of October. We also had a cleanup of white goods in St. James on the 16th of October, and on the 23rd of October we went down to St. Thomas Parish. And indeed on Saturday past we would have had a walk from Cotton Ground all the way up to Herbert Beach. That was a huge success because we had well over 100 persons participating in that walk. Well, in July I had this particular theme for the month of activities, and it goes like this, and I quote, embracing trust, confidence and continuity as we celebrate our 10th anniversary. And it speaks to myself and what I have been trying to accomplish there in St. James. And I believe the trust and confidence is there, and of course the continuity speaks to me being the representative of St. James Nevis 4 and continuing to do so until the people of St. James determine that enough is enough, and I do believe they want me to continue. So that is why the theme was framed this way. But we had those activities, and I want to thank everyone who would have participated in some way or the other. Those who benefited as well, I want to say, well, that is what we do. We give back from time to time, because to whom much is given, much is expected. But Webbo, as I start out this evening with giving some update on my stewardship, I said earlier to myself that it would be a challenge to get over 20 years of performance and interaction with the people of St. James in and out of government, or out of government and in government, I should say. But we'll try and suppress it in some way so as to give the general public an idea as to what or exploit have been over the last at least 10 years since being elected, and somewhat before what I would have done in the community. And as I start, I want to say that one of the sayings that you have on some mornings when you would present your thought for the day, I can recall one way you would have used this a couple of times, and it goes like this: first they laugh at you, then they ridicule you, then they mock you, then you win. I might have missed some of it, but I suppose at some point you will repeat it on a given day, and I'll get the whole of it then. But it speaks to my candidacy and the way that I would have entered politics to some extent. I was not expected to be the one to be the representative of St. James at this point in time, but that's okay, because there are opportunities that come knocking from time to time, and I've always said that any opportunity that comes my way, I'll grab it with both hands. So indeed, some may have said in the past or prior to me being elected that I could not win any elections in St. James, and of course I would have won thus far 3 local elections, one in 2011, 2013 and 2017. Some may have said that I would not last in government, but yet I'm still there after 8 years doing the work of the people of St. James and by extension the island of Nevis. I will go further and say some may have said that I couldn't perform in government because I've never been elected up to that point in time, and I've never been in government. So their thinking was it was something that would have been overwhelming for me. But indeed, such were the low expectations of some persons, but this actually provided me and created that opportunity for me to work even harder so as to boost my performance in government, and that I have done. And so the records will show that I have proven to be one of the most hard-working and reliable representatives of the constituency of St. James, and by extension, I have to say by extension, the island of Nevis, because once you're elected in a particular constituency, you're working for your constituency, but then you have to spread your wings throughout the entire island of Nevis, because you're a representative of the people of Nevis ultimately, and the island of Nevis. So Webbo, I want to say here that I believe that there are times when you have to blow your own trumpet. It is not to be done in a derogatory way, or one where you're beating your chest per se, but it can be done in the nicest of ways to bring out exactly what you're trying to impart. And of course, I do believe and I appreciate that there is great power in humility. So even though I'm blowing my trumpet, or I may seem to be doing so, it doesn't mean that I'm being extrovert or brash or in your face in any way. But I'm just suggesting to you that there are times when one has to lay it out on the table that I have done this or I have done that, and let the people be reminded of what you have done. And in my humility and in my state of humbleness, I've always been guided by Matthew chapter 5 verse 5, which speaks to blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And being meek does not mean that you're weak in any way, but it therefore means that you have those characteristics which are simply being, gentle, quiet, obedient, and doing what you have to do. But then again, you can be a gentle giant in all that you do. And I think that somewhat encapsulate myself as a person in terms of how I conduct myself in and out of government. So Webbo, let's look back a little bit before we jump forward, because I never saw myself as a politician prior to July thereabout. No, let's back up to January of 2006, when I was first elected to the executive of the Concerned Citizens Movement. I was someone who was involved in many different areas in the community. For example, I was a school teacher at one point back in 2008 to 2000, or not 2008, let me get it right, 1988 to 1991, there about January of 1991. Then I would have left teaching and would have gone to TDC and managed a car rental company for a number of years. I believe it was about 5 or 6 years. Then I went off island and did my studies and came back to Nevis. But prior to that, there were a number of community-related groups that I was involved in. For example, I was involved in Boys Brigade, the AYPA, which is the Anglican Young People's Association. Those are out there in the community who would recall the 4-H organization. We dealt with the head, the heart, the hands, and the health. 4-H. Also the Nevis Youth Council. I was involved in various sporting clubs like the Highlights Cricket Club, which started in Brooklyn and then morphed into what is now the Highlights International Sports Club. I was an opening batsman, of course. I did some wicket keeping, and also I opened as a batsman for that team up there in Fountain, the Upsetters Cricket Club. I opened for them for a number of years. As a matter of fact, if I were to go back to the Highlights International Sporting Club, I was the president back in 2008 thereabout, and at the same time was the captain of that particular club or that team. And of course the team would have made it to the finals in 2 different competitions, which I was the captain. We never won the competition, of course, and indeed that club would have won under my leadership the Nevis Football Association tournament back in 2008, I believe. So we would have had some exploits, and that was under my leadership. As a matter of fact, since I'm on cricket, I can say that I was also one who was selected to play trial matches for the Nevis Youth Cricket Team and also the senior cricket team. Those guys who I played against would know of my exploits as an open batsman, but anyway, I never made it to any of those teams to represent Nevis abroad, but at least such were my exploits. But Webbo, I laid the foundation that way because I have been in and around the community in a number of ways, a number of capacities. So I've lived there, been there, done that. As a matter of fact, if I were to back up, even before that basketball court was removed from there in Newcastle, after the expansion of the Van Samry International Airport, or the old airport that was there that is now the Van Samry International Airport, many a times I would take my clothes with me to town when I worked at TDC. That is my shorts and my t-shirt and my shoes, and I would just stop there in the evening and play it until 10 o'clock in the night. I had a famous name then because they used to call me power forward. I always felt like I was one of those power forwards in basketball. So we've been there, and as young men we were always happy-go-lucky guys and always used to live together and live as one community. So the entire parish of St. James would have seen me and have known me over my lifetime, and that is why I believe when the elections were local election, that is, was held in 2011, I was victorious. But there are other things that I was involved in, Webbo, but let me look specifically at some of the things that I've done in government and how I got there to start with. As I said before, 2006 January, I was elected to the executive of the Concerned Citizens Movement. The Concerned Citizens Movement would have lost government in July of 2006. So we had on our hands a challenge in that instead of being in government and continuing the great works that the CCM was doing then, we were placed into opposition by whatever means, but that's okay. It opened the door for persons like myself and, of course, the leader of the party at this time, the Honorable Mark Brantley. We both entered in terms of the politics the same year, and we are still there, and we are now Premier and Deputy Premier of this blessed island of ours. But if I were to look at how I got to elective politics, somewhere around 2008, the Honorable Nurse Jean Harris, who was the representative of St. James for 10 years up to that point in time, said she was ready to finished or done away with elective politics, and the party at that time was looking for someone to replace Nurse Jane Harris. Like I said, at that point in time, I had no interest in elective politics. But when you look around Webbo, no one actually put up their hand and say, I'm ready. There are persons who perhaps were ready to get into the fray, but being in opposition, many persons shy away from fighting that fight, because it is not easy being in opposition, and no one actually came forward. But of course there were names being bandied about and said there were some persons who were interested, but no one came to the fore. As a matter of fact, that opened the door for myself, and I, being fearless in many regards, I said I will take on the challenge. And at that point in time, I can recall we were right to the back of us here at an executive meeting here in the conch shell, what we call then Spotlight. And everyone looked at me and I said, listen, I don't have much. I'm not interested in politics per se, but I'll give it a try. And I decided and determined then I would give it a try. I also said to the executive that I have a U.S. passport in my possession. But by the time an election is held, that will not be an issue for the party to deal with. And the party has never ever had to deal with such an issue, because I was forthright and honest about myself at that point in time. I had already made up my mind then that is what I was going to do. I was going to represent the CCM party, because the party was looking for a new sense of purpose, a new sense of direction. And of course the Honorable Mark Brantley and myself were two young persons who got into the fray early. I believe I was about 37 or 38 years old, but I was fearless, like I said, and we got into the cut and thrust of politics, and it was a major challenge. Of those of you out there who can recall the battles we have had, Webbo, I can always recall sitting right here behind these microphones many a nights in support of the Honorable Mark Brantley when he is off of his program on the mark. I would come here and take on the challenge, and you know, starting out was rough. Over time we would have gotten a little bit better, I'm sure, but it was difficult in those days. But I was never dissuaded in any way. I was never deterred, because I understood the reason and the rationale behind me getting into politics, to ensure that the island of Nevis, the road that it was on then, that I can make a difference and bring about a change in this our blessed land. So we got into politics. In 2011 we had a local election. Of course I would have run in a federal election prior to that in 2010, but we are sticking with local tonight and trying to get to where we are in terms of what we have done as the representative. So in 2011 I would have won that particular election. Indeed, there was some challenges with that election. It was an election marred with a lot of irregularities, and one of these days we'll go back through all that, but there's no time for that this evening. But of course that election, myself would have won my seat, and also the Honorable Vance Amry would have won his seat up there in Nevis 3, Gingerland. The Honorable Mark Brantley, of course, that election was marred with irregularities, and he would have lost, so they claim, but he challenged that election after losing by 14 votes with 14 spoiled ballots. And it's the first time in the history of Nevis. So I was associated with history, in the sense that my name was on the ticket for the Concerned Citizens Movement at that point in time. The first time in the history of the island of Nevis where an election was challenged and eventually overturned by the court. So we went back to the polls in 2013, and of course the Honorable Mark Brantley won his seat by 240 votes. I won the constituency of St. James by 220 votes, and the Honorable Vance Amry, the leader of the party, then would have won his seat there in Gingerland. So we got into government in 2013, and of course, as I said before, most persons may not have given me a chance in government, of course, but I rolled up my sleeve that year, Webbo, and said to myself that the people of St. James did not have any representation in government between 2006 and January of 2013, and I told myself, this is St. James' time, and this is St. James' chance to rise above the other constituencies if we can do that. I mean, the whole of Nevis is important to us, but when you're elected by a constituency, your first love and your first obligation is to your constituents and your constituency. So I would have gone about my business from 2013 until now. And indeed, it was unfortunate that the lone person in cabinet between 2006 and 2013 or 2010 thereabout would have abandoned ship and went across to St. Kitts, but I saw this as an opportunity when I was elected to redeem the circumstances there in St. James, and that is what I would have done. In 2013, of course, the circumstances financially in this island was pretty much dire. We had a situation where most of the resources that were available to the previous administration had been depleted, and we had to pretty much start afresh in terms of getting things done on the island of Nevis. Indeed, I was fortunate to be appointed the Minister of Agriculture, Lands, Housing, Cooperative, Fisheries, Natural Resources, also Communications, Works, Public Utilities, Posts, et al. So I had a number of ministries, and the burden, of course, was heavy, but the burden was made light because I have said before that I am a hard worker, and I am one who takes on challenges irrespective of what they are, and that is seen all up and down the island of Nevis when you see me at work. But I took on the challenge of these ministries. The Nevis Housing and Land Development Corporation, of course, was placed into my responsibility, and of course we would have done a number of houses irrespective of the challenges and the difficulties we would have met. So we would have done houses over the years that have been responsible for that institution in Bath, in Cherry Garden, Church Ground, Zion, Maddens, 2 locations in Maddens. And as I speak of Maddens, I am always proud of that new development that we would have initiated there at what we call 14 acres, which is called Cedar View. And of course, every time anyone goes through that particular development, they would say it's one of the most beautiful housing developments in Nevis. And I encourage persons to go across and have a look. And the reason why I'm proud of that particular housing development is because the vision that was there to initiate that particular housing development was born out of the fact that Bricklin proper is pretty much built out. So you needed to expand the village and get housing for the persons in the area and persons who wanted to move in the area as well. So we expanded the village of Bricklin, and somewhat Butlers too, because there are persons from Butlers who would have moved to Maddens to live. That is Cedar View. So we have that beautiful development, and we are continuing with a phase 3 of that development shortly. But we also did additional housing in Nisbet settlement, and we also initiated a brand new development up there at Garner's, which is University Heights. That is tailored to our university and college graduates, those who would have done 4 years in a university or a college, and it is meant to encourage our young men and young women to stay here on the island of Nevis to assist with the development of the island of Nevis. So once you'd have gone abroad and studied and back to Nevis at least for 5 years or more, then you are eligible in that you get at least 8,000 square feet of land at $1 per square foot, and then of course a house valued at somewhere around 350,000 or more if you so desire. So that development is almost built out, but we have had some persons who would have taken up the offer, and thanks to the Nevis Island administration for that particular initiative. So we have built houses as I'm on that particular topic in Cotton Ground, Kuhun area. We have done some private construction throughout the island of Nevis as well. In terms of road construction, we have done road construction, and I'm putting it this over, Webbo, because I'm not sticking with just St. James alone, because as I said, once you become the representative of a particular constituency, indeed you have to work on behalf of that constituency, but you also have to spread your wings and take care of the entire island, and that we would have done. So in terms of road construction, under my leadership, we have done concrete road construction in Rollins Village, River Path, Matchman Road, Hickman's, Fothergills, at the bottom of Zion, in Butlers, in Cedar View Housing, of course, Bricklin. Those of you who are familiar with what we call down the range, or that was done just about 2 years ago. And of course, roads were done in Pasture area in Brooklyn. Of course, we have done road in Potworks, in Garner's Estate, Nisbet Settlement, Fountain, Shaw's Road. And as I touch on Shaw's Road, Webbo, I am always pleased and satisfied that I was able to bring that improved infrastructure to the people of Newcastle, because when I returned to Nevis in 2003, the road was an old concrete road. Persons refused to drive on that road. But that road was in a state of disrepair for many, many years prior to 2003, of course. And it was always my intention to get that road done. And it was done in 2016. And when you drive that road, it is a marvel. It is one that persons are impressed with, and I myself, I am happy that I was able to bring that improved infrastructure. What that has done is that it has brought persons back in the area. A lot of persons who attend the Medical University of the Americas, whether it's students or those who are professors there, live on Shaw's Road, and you can see them as a family taking a leisurely stroll from time to time. That is what infrastructure does to your community. It brings out the best in your people, it brings out the best in your community, and that is why I'm happy that we were able to improve that infrastructure. As a matter of fact, if I were to stick while I'm in Newcastle, because my pride and joy has always been the construction of the Newcastle Police Station and Fire Hall. Many thought that it couldn't be done, and I will say here, and I will put it on the table and be blunt about this. I believe if anyone else other than a CCM representative or even myself as a representative of St. James was not in government at this time to construct a brand new police station over there at Newcastle, I do not believe it would have been done. And the reason why I say that, Webbo, is because when you hear the rhetoric coming from the other side, they're always quick to point out that there is something so wrong with the police station. They have come with all kinds of things in terms of saying that, oh, it costs more than it should, or it is too big or too large, or even the name on the police station. I mean, I don't respond to those things really, but I will say this to you. That police station was a commitment made to the police officers who lived in the previous police station, which had run into a state of disrepair. It was an environment, Webbo, that if I was to live in it, I will not even stick my head into it, much less live in there. And the policemen and women who lived there was under distress, was in a deplorable condition, and I felt it was my duty, and it was a commitment made by myself to the officers who were there, that I will seek to construct a brand new facility for them. And I am pleased that we were able to accomplish that. We started the construction in December of 2017 and completed construction and had the opening and everything. I believe it was December of 2019. It is a beautiful structure, Webbo, and the reason why the police station is so important to the community over there, I will say from the onset at this juncture, that if I was to tear down the old building that was there and never rebuilt it, then I certainly wouldn't have expected to be re-elected by the people of St. James, because you would have destroyed something that you were unable to rebuild. But luckily, and because of my pursuit and exploits, we were able to rebuild that police station, and it is there to serve the community, to provide the safety and security that the community needs. In that, we have a medical university over there. Students are attending that university. We also have hotels over there. We have persons who live there in the community. We also have persons who need driver's license. It serves many different purposes, Webbo. And most of all, it provides the comfort for the police who work in that station, so that they can relax and in a decent environment, so that they can get up the next day recharged to go about their duties.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. I know that, as you said, we probably need 20 years to talk about what you feel you should be talking about, but we're pressed for time, so I'm going to get a break. I'm going to give you another opportunity, another couple of minutes. Then I got a couple of questions that I would want to ask, and then I'll go to the callers for the remaining minutes for a few questions as well. So let me get this break, and then we will come right back. This is Talk That Get Results. Deputy Premier and Representative for St. James, the Honorable Alexis Jeffers in the Nevis Island Assembly, celebrating 10 years of service as a parliamentarian. We'll be back right after this.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts, or call them at 466-4938.
Sugar City St. Kitts. Keep it sweet. Keep listening to Vaughn.
Back with this episode of Talk That Get Results. The Honorable Alexis Jeffers, the area representative for St. James in the Nevis Island Assembly. He's celebrating 10 years of service in that position, and indeed he is the incumbent in the upcoming Nevis Island Assembly elections for St. James that is due in by December or a little later 2022. Mr. Jeffers, let's continue. You got a couple more things to outline, and then we go into a few questions.
Yes, thanks, Webbo. Well, I'm done with the police station for now, because there'll be more times when we'll go over matters pertaining to the station, of course. But the other project or entity that is really one that I want to talk about, and one that pleases me every time when I look at it, is the VOJN sporting facility. Well, if I may say, in 2006 that facility was started. The work on that facility was started, but abandoned shortly after, because government changed in July of 2006, and it was never touched again. It was never touched again because, of course, like I said, the vision that existed then by the CCM in government, I am certain that the party that came into government thereafter didn't share that same vision, because they didn't do anything with that particular facility. Now, in 2016 thereabout, when the finances and the resources were available, I indicated to the cabinet of the Nevis Island administration it was time to get that facility completed. So we went about, first of all, lighting the facility, because I always felt that the lighting of the facility is important to persons who want to at least play some football or cricket in the evening, or even have a leisurely walk around the field at nights, even at the same time while we were completing the pavilion. So we got the facilities lighted, we got the pavilion constructed, or finished the construction of the facility, and I will say to you, Webbo, that is now the main sporting arena in Nevis when it comes to cricket, and that is the vision that was there from the get-go in terms of 2006 when the facility was started. And it's a pity that persons didn't share the same vision thereafter, but that is the same vision that we had in 2006 and also in 2016 when we saw the need to complete that particular facility. Beautiful facility, Webbo, and it is certainly providing the young men and young women in the area with an area where they can go and have some recreation. And also, cricket is being held there these days almost every weekend. Major tournaments are being held there, and indeed the entire island of Nevis have been coming there on a Sunday. As a matter of fact, Grove Park, as we see it, was always the only area, and I say Grove Park, but the correct name is the E.T. Willett Park, but that was the only area, so to speak, where major tournaments were held. But I am so happy that St. James is now in the forefront of cricket here on the island.
Here's what we got to do, though, because we are really running out of time, and perhaps some of the other stuff that you want to highlight may come up a little later on, and if not, you're always welcome to come back again. But I really like to ask a few questions, and more importantly, get the public involved as well, if they choose to do so on 869-469-1616 and or 1700. A couple of things. You have indicated a number of things that you have done, and you said obviously you have a lot of things more that you like to point out that you have done as well. Nonetheless, your critics argue that you have not done a whole lot of stuff on Nevis since you've been in government. You have just pointed out that you've done quite a bit. And one of the things that you pointed out that you have done is roads. But your critics also argue you've done too many roads. But yet you have not done roads in Fountain and Mount Lily.
Well, Webbo, in terms of roads, there are many different pieces of roads to be done throughout the island of Nevis. And of course, resources are needed to construct all of the roads. We have outlined to the general public that we will be constructing roads in various areas on the island. And of course, we will get to Fountain, Mount Lily, Westbury, and Camps, that ring road, of course. But here's the thing, Webbo. Persons will say you're doing too many roads. But the question I would want to ask anyone who makes such claim is just tell us which roads that we should not be doing at this point in time. And if they were in government, which roads they would choose not to do. Because roads are always needed. It is a major part of our infrastructural development. And every single community on the island of Nevis would like their road to be done. Those that haven't been done as yet, for sure. But I would want to ask anyone out there to point out to us or point out to me which particular stretch of roads you will not do that is being done or that has been done by myself or even the CCM in government. Because the persons who use our roads are very much critical of bad roads, yes, because they have to spend a lot of money to get their vehicles repaired and the likes. And that is why we have to improve the surfaces throughout the island, and we'll get to each and every one shortly. But we have to do roads, Webber, because there are a lot of pluses in terms of the overall effect and impact on the community, whether financially or even for the driving purposes.
And you spoke glowingly about your involvement in the community before you got elected.
Mm-hmm.
And yet some people argue that since you've become an elected representative, they don't see you as much.
Well, perhaps I'm busy working, Webber, but here's what it is. If they don't see me, they feel my impact. And why I say they feel my impact, because all the things that I have to talk about here this evening have been of some impact to the community of St. James or impact to the island of Nevis. But some may say they don't see me as often, but some who would have just decided they are going into politics haven't been seen for over 20 years or almost 20 years, but they have been seeing them as of recent times. So I don't know if the comparison is being made between myself and those who have now decided they are getting into politics, because I know there is a particular individual who would have said that she just decided a year ago to get into politics, but she has been living in the community of St. James for 20 years. 20 years is a long time, but if I were to remind you, Webber, when I just spoke, I spoke of my days as a school teacher. I spoke of my days of being in the community playing basketball, playing cricket, being in 4-H, being in AYPA, being in the Nevis Youth Council, and all of these particular youth groups, and representing teams in my community by way of captain and
as you mentioned, one of your the person who is getting involved, who just made a point. You have now two other persons who have declared a candidacy for St. James. Each time you ran, as far as I can recall, the records will show you had one opponent.
Yes.
This time, up to this point you have two. What do you make of that? Is it
I-
going to be easier for you? Is it going to be more difficult?
I think it will be easier, Webbo, in that I believe those two candidates are running against each other because, as far as I know, both of them are NRP candidates. That is my feeling because when it was all said and done, I listened to one of the candidates here on your show, I believe last week, who said that she was asked by a party to run at some point in the past in 1994 and since then. But I cannot recall that the CCM would have asked anyone other than myself since 2008 to run in an election over there, and I've been winning since I've been running.
And
for
that
the
same
CCM.
candidate is Miss Jeffers. right?
Miss Jeffers.
Any
yes.
relation? You are Alexis Jeffers. She is Patricia Jeffers.
Well, the only similarity is Jeffers, really, but
so
but
they're not related.
not related as far as I'm concerned. But Webbo, listen.
And speaking about her, though, she did mention she was here last week, as you indicated, and I asked her of her candidacy. Who will win the St. James seat this time around? She said she will. I asked her what is her pathway to the to victory, because in politics
Sure.
you normally ask that. What's her stronghold?
Sure.
Statistics show over the years that your strong, very strong areas, and your Castle, Butlers, and Brickhill. Ms. Jeffers says that her pathway to the victory is through Butlers and Brickhill. Those are her stronghold areas, which are supposed to be your stronghold areas. You say what?
I say, Webbo, listen, I commend her for the way she would have answered you. But if you were to ask me the same question, if I was in her position, I would have said the same thing. Because you see, Webbo, talk is cheap and it's easy to say, I will win. Everyone comes out with that particular notion. But in order to win, we understand what it takes to win. First, you have to be in and among your community. And as far as I am concerned, I will not spend much time on that particular candidate, Ms. Jeffers, as you said. But I will tell you that you first have to be there in and among the people in order to be recognized by the persons. But I will tell you, the same way she said that she will win Butlers and Brickhill, is the same thing I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you that the results that we've had since 2011 with increased margins, 39 in 2011, 220 in 2013, and 306 in 2017.
I haven't spoken to the NRP candidate, that's Dr. Hodge. We hope that we will get an opportunity to. But for the time being, based on what Ms. Jeffers has said of the MRM, based on what you have said of the CCM, Butlers and Brickhill will be two, very hot areas in terms of battleground, because you will win it convincingly, you argue, and Ms. Jeffers says that's her pathway to victory. Now here's what we're going to do. I'm going to cut short my questions to allow the callers at 869-469-1616 and or 1700. We have a preference to accommodate you at this time. Again, I said, Mr. Jeffers, you're always welcome to come back because we're pressed for time. In the meantime, as we wait for the callers anyway, we perhaps can go to another question I wanted to ask you. I know you were concentrating on the Nevis Island Assembly elections at this point in time, but you had indicated that you had become also a representative for St. James and St. Thomas at the federal level. How have you seen that additional responsibility since you became the representative? Has it helped your cause? Has it helped Nevis? Now, just pause a bit with that question, because I really want to accommodate the folks, so let me go to the lines. But you can. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hi, Webbo.
Yes.
Good evening to you, and good evening to your listeners. This is Mark Brantley. I wanted to call Webbo to congratulate the Honorable Alexis Jeffers on achieving his 10th anniversary as an elected parliamentarian for the people of St. James. The people of St. James have been good to Alexis They have been good to the concerned citizens movement that I'm privileged to lead at this point in our history. And I wanted to publicly commend Alexis because he and I entered politics around the same time. But unlike many, we entered in opposition. We joined our hands together, our hearts, and put our shoulders to the wheel in opposition to try and get Nevis back on a proper footing. And that we were able to do. We fought the fight. We fought together in the trenches. And we have always been friends, but we have become even closer over the years because we have been there shoulder to shoulder fighting this battle. I would wish to make it clear that I have every confidence in the capacity of the Honorable Alexis Jeffers to perform for the people of St. James. I know his love for his constituency because in the cabinet he argues vociferously for St. James and for the people of St. James, as indeed we all do for our constituencies. So I am very well aware of his passion. I'm well aware of the achievements, because even though he's achieving 10 years in politics as an elected parliamentarian, recall he only got into government in 2013, and so really has only had about 7 years in government, and he's now of course serving as the deputy premier and has moved on as well to now be serving federally. So I want to lend my voice to the voice of so many in congratulating him, wishing him continued good health, strength and energy. We have a saying that he's the action minister, and when we want something done, we put it in his hands because we know that he will get it done. And he mentioned the Newcastle police station earlier. I believe that that is worthy of mention again simply because of the history that single-handedly was done by Alexis Jeffers. I say single-handedly because when others didn't believe that it could be done, he believed that it could be done. And he took it on his shoulders and he got it done. And I believe that that is a testament to the tenacity, the strong-willed nature, the committed nature of the man. And I am convinced that he will continue to serve the people of St. James with distinction. And so I just wanted to call to make that plain, that he and I have been there from the inception. And so long as God gives us strength, we will continue to be there. And he has my support, he has my love, because he has demonstrated throughout his career in public service that he puts people above himself. And that is why we're here, Webbo, to serve others, not ourselves. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Don't forget 469-1616 or 1700. Maybe you can go to that question in reference to the federal seat.
Yes, Webbo. At least either seat is about representation, and of course the job that I've done at the local level included the representation of the people of St. Thomas Parish as well. At least my exploits there are very well known in terms of housing, human resource development and otherwise. So in terms of the transition from the local to the federal, it was easy in the sense that some may say you have two jobs and that should be a challenge. I see this as an added burden in terms of what I have to do for both constituencies and also the entire island of Nevis. But I have said before that when these challenges come, I accept them with both hands open widely in terms of embracing the challenge. And I would think that over the next 5 years from the federal level, the people of St. Thomas's would certainly continue to feel my level of representation as the people of St. James have done over the years, because my commitment is to both constituencies and beyond as well. But I believe to this point in time, the people of St. Thomas's can be equally as proud of my representation as the people of St. James. But there's much more to be done, Webbo. So there is no difficulty there, because when we decided to run in the federal election back in 2010, it was about representation, and it was about the people and what they were looking for in terms of having someone who has their best interests at heart. So that is the comfort that I have in knowing that it would be representation similar to what I've exerted there in the constituency of St. James.
Okay, again, remember we don't have a lot of time. If you want to ask a question or make a comment, you can do it just about now. 469-1616 or 1700. Here's another criticism that I picked up in reference to you, Mr. Jeffers. One of the, even as we sometimes have the discussion here on Let's Talk with the Heavyweights, people will argue that you are doing two certain things, you and your party, because an election is imminent. Let me take this and come right back.
Sure.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good night, Webbo.
Yes.
And good night to the Honorable Alexis Jeffers. Good night.
Yeah, good night, sir.
I want to commend you for your 10 years here in government. And I believe that the 10 years you served near this administration, I believe that you have done a wonderful job as far as I hear. And the people can talk about you in your constituency. And I want to commend you on behalf of serving the federal government at the Agriculture, Minister of Agriculture. I believe that you're doing a wonderful job, especially under this pandemic COVID situation. And I believe that you show an example towards the Agriculture Minister in the Federation, serving the Federation. I have animals, and as far as I'm concerned, we get something back from the Agriculture Department, especially when the government sacrifices to taking over our animals them, and people who get lost, they get back something, and you need the Ministry of Agriculture, and just come along with people get food for the animals and all these things. So I believe if you can do so good for the federal, I believe you continue to do it for the newest island administration. And I do not believe that the people I believe that the people they don't have no other choice to let you back in the newest island administration. Could continue to do the wonderful job for them. And you have a wonderful, God bless the federation and think it is. God bless you, brother. You're doing a wonderful job. God bless.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. 469-1616 and 1700. While no one is on the line, Mr.
Yes.
Jeffers, to the question.
Sure. Well, Webbo, the question that you ask is an important one, because from time to time you hear persons criticizing what you're doing, especially in the final year of a term. And I have always said that once you have a mandate for 5 years, you're expected to work for and on behalf of the people for 5 years. That is the mandate you get from the onset. So we are going to work until the 5-year mandate is done. And I want persons to tell me what point in time in those 5 years should one stop working. Because if we stop working tomorrow and say, well, election is coming next year, December, the opposition say you're all doing too much, or you're all doing it just because an election is coming, so we stop work, then the opposition will definitely have something to say in that you're not doing anything, so get rid of the CCM party. Well, I am putting it on the table tonight that the CCM party will work all the way down to the end of the term, in that we had that mandate from the onset. We are not prepared to stop. We have to fulfill that mandate for the people, because that is why they elected us. So everything that we do is a part of our agenda, which we would have indicated from day one when we were voted into government once again back in 2017. So we have roads to do, we have infrastructural development to do, we have our human resource capacity to build, and we're going to do that until the term is over. So we have things to do, Webbo, and you'll see a lot more being rolled out over the ensuing months.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening. I would just like to say congratulations to Mr. Alexis Jeffers for doing such an awesome job in the parish of St. James's. Mr. Jeffers, continue to do what you're doing, because you are doing a very good job.
Thank you very much.
God continue to bless you. I'm calling from the British Virgin Islands.
Thank you very much, and appreciate your call as well. And stay
You're
safe.
welcome.
Stay safe. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Jeffers, go ahead.
Yeah. So about that question, like I said, I just answered it, and I believe that it is understood by the general public that this party in government have work to do, and will continue doing our work. As a matter of fact, touched on roads before, and persons have been demanding that the roads be done, and of course we intend to go up to Westbury, Fountain, Mount Lily camps, that ring road. So my question is, should we leave it for someone else to do? And I say no, it is for us to do, and we'll get it done along with the Island Main Road as well.
The new one of the new political parties, the Morals Restoration Movement, and their philosophy is derived from impart your performance or lack thereof in government, as well as they say the other parties. In terms of morals, they're not satisfied with the way you as a party operate, and thus the birth of the Morals Restoration Movement. One of the things they argue is that your party, under the leadership of Mr. Brantley, takes care of only people who support the concerned citizens movement. You say what? Let me take this, and then you can go back to the question. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert. I'm just calling to compliment the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, representative for St. James. He has done his best, and I would encourage him to continue to do his best. He's there for only 10 years, and he has already put in 20 years service. May God continue to bless him, and I wish him all the best. Good health and strength. Alexis, all the way for St. James. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you very much. So the morals and sometimes I don't like to repeat these words, but they're phrases that you hear around elections, the nepotism and
corruption and all that,
and so on. But they argue, when the leader were here last week, they said, and matter of fact, he quoted Mr. Brantley, your leader, the premier, as saying that he has to look after the persons who supported and have him where he is. You say what?
Well, Webbo, I will say there's absolutely nothing wrong with looking after persons who have gotten you where you are. Of course, when you get into government, the picture becomes a bit larger. And I do not believe that the majority of persons here on the island of Nevis support the view of the leader of that particular party that you mentioned.
Okay, let me just take this, Mr. Salomon, and get back to you. But I really like to hear from the folks. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, thank you, Webbo, to take the call. Let me ask the Minister of Housing in Nevis, Mr. Jeffers, if he is considering a change in concept to the current structures single houses to more or less a condominium concept for the people of Nevis, in terms of using up less land and have a greater or larger density for a certain amount of people.
Okay,
well, thank you very much. Why don't we do it this way,
Mr.
Jeffers? Finish up what you were saying and then go to answer that question.
Yeah, as we were talking about the view being shared by or being expressed by the leader of the MRM. And I'm putting it out there, and I'm confident with this, that is a minority view. A very small segment of the community would express a view like that, including the leader of that particular party, because the majority of Nevisians have expressed their confidence in this administration in terms of our governance and in terms of the way that we have conducted business as an island. Webbo, I will point out this to you, and this may be a reminder to the leader of the MRM. For example, in road construction, there was one particular company doing all of the roads in Nevis in the past, so to speak, and they had all of their equipment, all of the equipment they would have brought in here from their country. So no one in Nevis, hardly anyone in Nevis, I should say, was getting any break in that regard. Persons couldn't license their trucks. Persons couldn't insure their trucks. Persons couldn't get a break anywhere. But since we have been in government, you have seen a mushroom. The trucking industry has mushroomed. Persons are now their own boss, so to speak. We have empowered our young men and young women in some regards, because some young women work with some of these entities in various capacities. So we have empowered our people in that regards, whereby we say these roads, for example, belong to us. We are the ones who are the end users, and we are the ones who will pay the taxes. So there is nothing wrong with our people getting the chance to construct these roads and all of the ancillary benefits that come that are derived from road construction. I use that as an example because you cannot hear anything negative being said about a foreign entity being involved in road construction and our locals are being left out, because that is how we think. We think about our Nevis people first. We think about people first, as a matter of fact. And sometimes when we campaign, we come up with some negatives so as to score cheap political points. But if we are honest with ourselves, we will say that the Concerned Citizens Movement, under the leadership of the Honorable Mark Brantley, have done an excellent job in steering this country through this island, through all of the difficult times that we have been facing over the last 18 months or more. As a matter of fact, you'll hear the Honorable Mark Brantley say from time to time that we have been robbed of almost 18 months of some of the progress and some of the plans that we had in mind that we were going to execute. So I come full circle and tell you that I don't share that view, and I know for a fact the majority of Nevisians will say that the Concerned Citizens Movement as a party has certainly looked after the entire island of Nevis. Some may feel they haven't gotten enough, but that's the reality of life. We always need a little more.
So to the question of the caller in terms of housing condominium style so that you use less acreage?
Well, it is a concept that I'm sure can be considered, Webbo. But at this point in time, I believe that all young men and young women out there who want to own a piece of property, we normally would subdivide an area into 5,000 square foot lots, and that is the benchmark that we use. I still believe that each person should own a piece of the rock. Nevis is still a large land space for sure. There are still areas in Nevis that hasn't been touched as yet. I do not necessarily believe in this condominium style where persons are lumped into a particular area. That exists in places like the Virgin Islands, for example, where you have a much larger population. Our population is not at that particular size as yet, nowhere close. And that is why I believe what we're doing, the concept we have in providing persons with a house and at least 5,000 square feet to go along with that house, where they can have a backyard and a front yard, and they can plant some type of crop or fruit trees, for example. I do believe that person should be able to plant something so that they have something that they can leave behind when it's all said and done. So I'm not there yet in terms of being sold on the condominium concept as it exists. And sometimes some of these housing developments where you have all these large buildings with multiple rooms, there are certain unsavory things that are bred in those areas that we don't want to invite here in Nevis per se. I don't want to go into details at this point in time, but the caller might be familiar with what I'm talking about. But when you have your own yard and you secure it with your own fence and the likes, then of course that is your domain and that is your space, and you take proper care of it and you do what you want in terms of enhancing it. And that is the type of thinking that I want to inculcate in our young men and young women.
The other criticism that I heard, even as we were discussing on an earlier program, was that in your manifesto that you had and the things that you promised, you have fell, and you meaning the Concerned Citizens Movement, you have fell very short of that. You say what?
I say absolutely not, but I'll say this as well, that a manifesto is like a guide to your term in government, and I cannot recall any party in government which would have fulfilled every single thing in their manifesto. And Webbo, it has to be looked at this way. There are times when you put that manifesto together, and it must be put together because you must have some guideline and some guidance as to how you'll conduct yourself in business. But once you get into government, circumstances do change from time to time. For example, we have a COVID pandemic that when we put our manifesto together in 2017, no one ever thought about a pandemic in 2020. So the plans and programs that you would have rolled out in 2018, 2019, we were going well. But then you had this pandemic to deal with from March of 2020. That would set you back, of course. So there are things that financially you couldn't undertake, and there are things that based on the current situation and the challenges where you had a lockdown of your borders, lockdown of your various construction site and other entities, that would have been like a stop and go. So it's difficult to execute. But in so much as we are speaking now, we are saying that in the next term, and I'm speaking confidently about our next term, things that were not done in this current term will be done in the second term. For example, Webbo, we constructed the water taxi facility, which I didn't touch on early, which is one of the major accomplishments of this administration because of what that represents and what it is meant to do. Now, the building next door, or the building on that property, is to be renovated. We have gotten the cost, but we are strapped for cash at this point in time. But indeed, the facility is doing what it is intended to do in terms of the movement of people back and forth from Nevis to our neighboring island of St. Kitts, or sister island of St. Kitts. So indeed, that is something that I can clearly say that we did not get accomplished up to this point in time. I am not so sure if we'll get it accomplished by the time the next election or by the time the elections are called. But I'll say this to you, that these are things that we will continue to do in our next term, because the people of Nevis have seen us at work, and they will indeed give us another term to continue our work. So indeed, the opposition will complain, not complain, but campaign that we didn't get A done, B done, or C done. And that may be true. But if you look at everything in its entirety, and you look at the circumstances that we would have had to navigate over the last 18 months at least, the voters out there would understand what we would have had to do, and to keep persons employed. For example, all of our workers that the NIA employ are still employed. We'll prefer to do that than to say send them home to get a building repaired, if you see what I mean. So we don't want to compound the difficulties of our people, but the PA, for example, is doing what it's supposed to do, even though that building...
The other political party, the Nevis Reformation Party, argues that you ought not to borrow to have the civil servants, to pay civil servants at this particular point in time, and you say one.
I almost want to use the word and say that is hogwash, really. But Webbo, let's put it this way. Every country, island and country throughout this world is suffering financially at this point in time. Now, if, for example, we don't borrow, for example, Webbo, it means we have to send home people, pretty much the entire staff of the NIA, or who are employed by the NIA. Is that what we want for Ireland? I say no. I just said that if you were to send home one person, you compound their problems. And that problem is not with that individual alone. It will be for his or her entire family. And it have a rippling effect throughout the entire economy as well, Webbo. But we have heard from the opposition that said you should not borrow, you should give concessions, you should waive taxes, even paying bills at NEVLEC and the water department and so forth. You must waive all those. But I believe that persons speak this way without even considering what they're saying, because once you start waiving all of these things, the government is run through taxes, for example. The taxes we collect at inland revenue, property taxes, customs dues, and that kind of thing. When you start waiving all of these things, it says to me that you limit or minimize the amount of monies that you'll have available to you to spend. But persons who say these things do not have an appreciation for how government is run. And it's easy to stay outside and say, waive all these, do not borrow. But if you don't borrow, and if you don't collect your taxes, well, the question is, where would the money come from? And we have to start speaking to the Nivision public as if we understand what is happening when it comes to running a country or island, and even so to bring it more into context. Running our life.
Here's what we're gonna do. Caller, you got 10 seconds. Go ahead, ask a question, Mr. Jeffers. I'll give you the opportunity to answer quickly, and then we've got to go. Caller, go ahead, please.
Yes. Honorable Jeffers?
Yes, sir.
How can you assist in making recommendations to the federal cabinet the concept of the peace program?
Okay. I don't know if we have enough time to answer that. I'll give you an opportunity. Well, maybe you can take that and some other forum. What I want you to do is give me your final words.
Well, final words. Well, thanks for having me this evening. And as I said from the onset, it would have been a challenge from the get-go to get a lot said as to my accomplishments and the things that I would have done over the last 8 years thereabout in government, plus also going back to my life in terms of how I would have gotten to politics. But you said the right thing is that we can come back at any point in time, and I would love to come back at some point and answer some of the questions that the persons would have for me. But it was indeed my pleasure. I want to thank everyone for their support over the last 10 years and more, and crave your support for the next 10 years to come, because we have a lot more work to be done in St. James. And I believe the people of St. James have had confidence in my representation, and will repose that confidence whenever the time comes, perhaps a year from now or thereabout. But it is certainly my pleasure to serve, and I have been humbling my service to the people, and I will continue to be just that over the years to come. Thank you very much, and thank you, Webbo, for having me this evening.
The Honorable Alexis Jeffers, thank you very much for joining us. This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On the Mark. Your voice in the community talk that get results. You all have a wonderful evening. We now go to Leadership Matters, a program by the government of St. Kitts and Nevis.
The views